Reading Wikipedia, Gaming Edition, 9th of February 2025, Donkey Kong Country. Donkey Kong Country is a 1994 platform game developed by Rare and published by Nintendo for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System (SNES). It is a reboot of Nintendo's Donkey Kong franchise and follows the gorilla Donkey Kong and his nephew Diddy Kong as they set out to recover their stolen banana hoard from the crocodile King K. Rool and his army, the Kremlings. The player traverses 40 side-scrolling levels as they jump between platforms and avoid obstacles. They collect items, ride minecarts and animals, defeat enemies and bosses, and find secret bonus stages. In multiplayer modes, two players work cooperatively or race. After developing Nintendo Entertainment System games in the 1980s, Rare, a British studio founded by Tim and Chris Stamper, purchased Silicon Graphics workstations to render 3D models. Nintendo sought a game to compete with Sega's Aladdin 1993 and commissioned Rare to revive the dormant Donkey Kong franchise. Rare assembled 12 developers to work on Donkey Kong Country over 18 months. Donkey Kong Country was inspired by the Super Mario series and was one of the first home console games to feature pre-rendered graphics, achieved through a compression technique that converted 3D models into SNES sprites with little loss of detail. It was the first Donkey Kong game neither produced nor directed by the franchise's creator, Shigeru Miyamoto, though he contributed design ideas. Following its announcement at the Consumer Electronics Show in June 1994, Donkey Kong Country was highly anticipated and backed by a major marketing campaign that cost $16 million in America alone. It was released in November 1994 to acclaim. Critics hailed its visuals as groundbreaking and praised its gameplay and music. Its quality and design were favourably compared to the Super Mario series. Donkey Kong Country received several year-end accolades and set a record for the fastest-selling video game at the time. With 9.3 million copies sold worldwide, it is the third best-selling SNES game and the best-selling Donkey Kong game. Following the success, Nintendo purchased a large minority stake in Rare, which became a prominent second-party developer for Nintendo during the late 1990s. Donkey Kong Country re-established Donkey Kong as a popular Nintendo franchise and helped maintain the SNES's popularity into the fifth generation of video game consoles. It is considered one of the greatest video games of all time and has been ported to platforms such as the Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, and digital distribution services. Rare followed it with two sequels for the SNES, Donkey Kong Country 2 Diddy's Conquest 1995 and Donkey Kong Country 3 Dixie Kong's Double Trouble 1996, and the Nintendo 64 game Donkey Kong 64 1999. After a hiatus during which Rare was acquired by the Nintendo competitor Microsoft, Retro Studios revived the series with Donkey Kong Country Returns 2010 for the Wii and Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze 2014 for the Wii U. Donkey Kong Country is a side-scrolling platform game, a reboot of the Donkey Kong franchise. Its story begins when King K. Rool and his army of crocodiles, the Kremlings, steal the Kong's banana hoard. The gorilla Donkey Kong and his nephew Diddy Kong set out to reclaim the hoard and defeat the Kremlings. Donkey and Diddy serve as the player characters of the single-player game. They run alongside each other and the player can swap between them at will. Donkey is stronger and can defeat enemies more easily. Diddy is faster and more agile. Both can walk, run, jump, pick up and throw objects and roll. Donkey can slap their terrains to defeat enemies or find items. The player begins in a world map that tracks their progress and provides access to the 40 levels. The player attempts to complete each level while traversing the environment, jumping between platforms, and avoiding enemy and inanimate obstacles. Level themes include jungles, underwater reefs, caves, mines, mountains and factories. Some feature unique game mechanics such as rideable minecarts, blasting out of cannons resembling barrels, and swinging ropes. Each area ends with a boss fight with a large enemy. Donkey and Diddy can defeat enemies by jumping on, rolling into, or throwing barrels at them. If hit by an obstacle, One of the Kongs runs off and the player automatically takes control of the other. They will only be able to control that Kong unless they free the other Kong from a barrel. In certain levels, the player can free an animal that provides the Kongs with special abilities, similar to Yoshi from the Super Mario series. Buddies include Rambi, a rhino that can charge into enemies and find hidden entrances, Ungard, a swordfish that can defeat enemies with its bill, Squawks, a parrot that carries a lantern, Espresso, an ostrich that flies, and Winky, a frog that can jump high. Each level contains collectible bananas, letters that spell out Kong, balloons, and animal tokens. These items can be found within the main level or by discovering hidden bonus stages where they are earned via solving puzzles. The player starts with 6 lives. Collecting 100 bananas, all the Kong letters, a balloon, or 3 of the same animal token grants extra lives. The player can visit other members of the Kong family from the world map. Funky Kong operates a flight service, allowing the player to travel across different areas of Donkey Kong Island. Cranky Kong, the aged incarnation, or father, of Donkey Kong from the original Donkey Kong 1981, provides tips and fourth-wall breaking humour, and Candy Kong saves the player's progress. The player can increase their completion percentage by finding bonus stages. Reaching a maximum 101% results in a different ending. The game also features 2 multiplayer game modes. In the competitive contest mode, players take turns playing each level as quickly as possible. In the cooperative team mode, they play as a tag team. In 1985, the British game developers Tim and Chris Stamper established Rare Limited. The brothers previously founded the British computer game studio Ultimates Play the Game and founded Rare to focus on the burgeoning Japanese console market. After Nintendo rejected their efforts to form a partnership in 1983, Chris Stamper studied the Nintendo Entertainment System hardware for 6 months. Rare demonstrated it was possible to reverse engineer the NES and showed several tech demos to Nintendo executive Minoru Arakawa. Impressed, Arakawa granted Rare a Nintendo developer license. Rare developed more than 60 NES games, including the Battletoads series. When Nintendo released their next console, the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, in 1991, Rare decided to limit their output. Around 1992, Rare invested their NES profit in Silicon Graphics Incorporation (SGI) challenge workstations with alias rendering software to render 3D models. It was a significant risk as each workstation cost £80,000. The move made Rare the most technologically advanced UK developer and situated them high in the international market. In 1993, Nintendo formed a partnership with SGI to develop the SNES successor, the Nintendo 64. Though they had purchased the workstations to produce games for the Nintendo 64, Rare discovered it was possible to use them with a 16-bit SNES. Rare tested the SGI technology with Battletoads Arcade 1994 and began developing a boxing game, Brute Force, using Power Animator. Around this time, Nintendo was embroiled in a console war with Sega, whose Mega Drive competed with the SNES. Nintendo wanted a game to compete with Sega's Aladdin 1993, which featured graphics by Disney animators, where Nintendo of America's chairman Howard Lincoln learned of Rare's SGI experiments during a trip to Europe. Nintendo sent several representatives, including the Chief Technology Officer Genyu Takada. They asked the Stampers if they could demonstrate brute force on the SNES hardware. Within 2 days, the Stampers developed a working build, impressing Nintendo. Tim Stamper, inspired by Mortal Kombat's 1992 use of digitized footage in place of hand-drawn art, suggested developing a platform game that used pre-rendered graphics. Nintendo granted the Stampers permission to use the Donkey Kong intellectual property. The franchise had been largely dormant since the unsuccessful Donkey Kong 3, 1983, so Nintendo figured that licensing it posed minimal risk. Some sources indicate that the Stampers obtained the license after Nintendo offered them their catalogue of characters and they chose Donkey Kong. Conversely, the lead designer Greg Miles and his brother Steve recalled that it was Nintendo that requested a Donkey Kong game. Donkey Kong's creator, Shigeru Miyamoto, said that Rare approached Nintendo and offered to handle Donkey Kong since other developers were preoccupied with franchises such as Mario and The Legend of Zelda. Rare assembled a team of 12, the largest in their history at that point, and development began in mid-1993. Nintendo was skeptical of Rare's approach to graphics, concerned it would make the game unplayable. Early in development, Mouse and other developers presented a demo to Nintendo staff in Japan. One in attendance, the Game Boy creator Gunpei Yokoi, felt the game looked too 3D, but Mouse said Miyamoto was supportive and gave Rare his approval. According to Mouse, Nintendo codenamed the project Country based on Rare's location in Twycross, leading to the title Donkey Kong Country. Other titles considered included Rumble in the Jungle, Monkey Mayhem, and Donkey Kong and the Golden Bananas. Donkey Kong Country was the first Donkey Kong game that was neither directed nor produced by Miyamoto, who was working on Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island 1995. Miyamoto was still involved with the project and Rare said he provided crucial input. Nintendo is usually highly protective of their intellectual properties, but was relatively uninvolved with Donkey Kong Country, leaving most of the work to Rare. Programmer Brendan Gunn noted that the stampers worked to shield the team from outside influence. Rare spent 18 months developing Donkey Kong Country from an initial concept to a finished game, and according to product manager Dan Elson, 20 people worked on it in total. It cost an estimated US $1 million to produce, and Rare said that it had the most man-hours ever invested in a video game at the time, 22 years. The team worked 12 to 16 hours every day of the week. Gunn said that the team was under significant pressure from the stampers and to finish the game in time for Thanksgiving due to Nintendo's competition with Sega.